Yo, what up, Street Talks there, Kim? All right, the Turbo Thought this morning. So, how to have more pride in your photography, what does it mean, and stuff like that. So, first and foremost, can't start off the day without a morning flex, right? So, what is the biggest issue that we have in our photography? I think it's actually that we lack pride. And why is pride important in the context of photography and above? So, some simple thoughts. So the first thought is, in American Western society, also Eastern society, actually I think every major culture around the world, to be self-centered and self-focused and prideful is considered a sin. So even if you think about America, it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, the typical notion of pride is a sin or pride is a vice runs deep in the consciousness everywhere, right? And so what is one allowed to have pride in? According to Benjamin Franklin, it's, hard work and industry. And therefore, what happens? We mindlessly throw ourselves into work, self-flagellation, you're just like whipping yourself in the back. And the harder you work, the more pain you endure, the more busy you are, the more productive you are, the more virtuous you are. And then you're able to have pride, right? You're allowed to have pride in your own self-suffering in the sake of work and bettering others in society and the world, but you're not allowed to have pride in yourself. Now, I think this is not a good thought because personal pride is, well, it's funny because you think about it, right? Like, if you're proud of yourself and you have pride in your photos, pride in your kid, pride in yourself, your thoughts, whatever, technically you're not hurting anybody, right? Like, Nassim Taleb has a funny aphorism, is like, meditation is the best way to be narcissistic without hurting anyone else. And even being narcissistic, I don't think you're not hurting nobody, right? At worst, you're like narcissist, you look at yourself in the water, at worst, you're the one who falls in and, you die, right? So, if you think from an ethics perspective, first, do no harm unto others, right? So pride doesn't hurt other people. Now, then it becomes a strange kind of zero-sum notion that if I have pride in myself and I'm proud of myself, and others witness me having pride in myself and they don't have pride in themselves, they themselves feel weakened or made smaller in comparison to you. And so, and also the problem too is in photography, I don't think I've ever met a photographer with high self-esteem besides kids who just like to shoot photos for fun, or even beginners because they just do it for fun. They don't really care about others or whatever. Like, even all of the accomplished photographers I've met in my short tenure, I've discovered that everyone has kind of like petty envy and jealousy of the success of other people, and they feel that the success of others and the other photographers and other individuals is somehow bringing them down. And it's funny, it doesn't really matter how successful they are. Like, even if you meet the most successful person in a bunch, they themselves, if they meet somebody more successful, they'll almost like find reasons why the other person's like not as legitimate as them. So for example, let me give you an example. Let's say you go to the gym, you lift weights, and you see somebody who's stronger than you or who can lift more, right? One might start to self-rationalize why the other guy is much stronger than you. So, that guy probably takes roids, or, he's bigger than me, or he's taller than me, or I'm short, or, I'm a mesomorph or I'm an ectomorph or he's a whatever morph. And actually, this notion of classifying body types, it's actually kind of akin to when they used to measure your cranium to see how small you are. It's like based on notions of racism. So even the ideas like, oh, Caucasian guys and African Americans or African descent individuals are way buffer and stronger than the Asian guys, right? Um, but actually, I think that also, and actually, I grew up thinking that too, right? Like, oh, genetically, naturally, you know, it's mostly Caucasians and African Americans, actually, or African descent individuals, like African, like it's funny because in America, actually, the peak of masculinity is actually African Americans in America. Yep, I'd probably say that. In terms of just overall like masculinity, buffness, whatever. So I was thinking, yeah, it was a funny thought I had was the first time I deadlifted 455 was that 4 plates and 25. And then everyone was so surprised, right? And I was like, hey yo, if I was African American and I did that, would you be as shocked or surprised? And I asked a friend, and they're like, yeah, probably not a surprise, right? So once again, there's this underlying racism that surrounds all of us. And I think the important thing is to, first of all, like, not be self-racist, right? Like, not to be like, oh, I can't do X, Y, and Z because I am this and so forth, and this color, this pigment, this heritage, this background, this genetics. And my friend Rand got me onto this notion of epigenetics, which is epi means on top of, like, EpiPen or whatever, or that's actually epinephrine. Epi means on top of, like maybe epicenter. Genetics, your genes. So the notion of epigenetics is actually, everyone's given a set of genetics, right? But through your personal training, your environment, and so forth, you could actually change how your genes are expressed. So, certain things which are kind of more hard-coded in our DNA genetics is like, for example, height, uh, hair color, eye color, right? So these are things you can't really change. I mean, you could dye your hair and stuff, but let's say height, right? Like you can't, like if both of your parents are 4 feet tall, you're probably not going to be 7 feet tall, right? But let's say you know, uh, get married, you mate with somebody else who is like 7 feet tall, then your next generation is going to get taller. So there are some things you can change, some things you can't. And maybe this is why I like weightlifting or powerlifting, whatever, is that it's pretty, it's more based on like how much you care, the time you put in, the effort you put in, whatever. And everyone could get strong regardless of who they are and make gains and progresses, which is kind of a fun thought. But anyways, like, let's say take it back to photography. So the biggest, also the best way to become more prideful in our photographer, to become more proud as photographers, it's via negativa. Like what Nassim Taleb's is like, what to subtract, what get rid of, right? So think about like what lowers your self-esteem, what lowers your pride. So for me, that's probably social media. It was Instagram. I deleted my Instagram in 2017, and since then my self-confidence, self-pride as a photographer has gone up. Because like it was funny because whether you like it or not, you're always going to use numbers to compare yourself to others. I mean, social media is kind of like a, you know, kind of like a pseudo dick measuring contest, right? You get 1,000 likes, this other guy gets 2,000 likes. You get 2,000 likes, someone else gets 10,000 likes. Someone gets 10,000 likes, someone gets 1,000,000 likes, and so forth. But the problem is the number of likes you get on a photo is actually not based on how good your photos are or how good of a photographer you are. It's actually based on how many followers you have, right? So that's actually kind of the irony. And this is also something that people don't realize. Like you look at Justin Bieber or other people, right? You don't necessarily gain a lot of followers because you're a great photographer or whatever. typically you gain a lot of followers because you're already famous. Isn't that a funny thought? Like, one does not get social media and become famous. One is already famous from something else, and then they hop onto Instagram or social media or Twitter or whatever, and then they accumulate a lot of followers because they're already famous. And so I think that's something that people haven't quite figured out yet, which maybe I'll be the first to make the intervention. And so to delete your Instagram, I think is the biggest act of courage you could do nowadays as a photographer. And I think it's actually a smart idea, because now when people talk about Instagram, it's almost like people talking about like fast food, right? It's like, oh, I just had a McDouble and a Coca-Cola, and I'm like, it's like, do you do you want to get obese? You want diabetes? Like, social media is like Instagram is like diabetes for photographers. Not good for your health, right? Um, and so that's important. Secondly, what's I mean, I was personally afflicted with this in the past too, right? Where, like, for some reason you're not really feeling your photography, and then you're like, you might be bored at work or somewhere, and you're just like mindlessly scrolling through these like camera websites, gear review websites, gear rumor websites, and actually what that does is it low key makes you it makes you look at your own current camera setup and think that it is insufficient. And this is also not a good thing, because I mean, this is also the cruel march of digital technology. There's always going to be another better version, right? So it's like, what's the best iPhone, or what's the best Ricoh, the one that's going to come out later next year, right? So and I think actually the camera you do use is important. Like, I'm currently using the Ricoh GR3X, and I love it. And it was funny because I remember when I was in college, right? I had the OG Canon 5D and the 35 f2 lens, and it was still so big, so heavy, and a pain to take it with me everywhere I go. And now I have a Ricoh GR, 3X, which is like a tenth of the size, maybe less, and the image quality is superior, and the high ISO capability is superior than the old DSLRs. So technology is good when you optimize it to get the smallest possible camera. I mean, if you're in the market of just getting something small, I would just recommend the Ricoh GR3X. People ask between the Ricoh 3 versus 3X. I've shot. I mean, the reason I got the 3X was because my Ricoh GR3 broke, because I shot with it so much. I think I have like over 1 million actuations on it or whatever. And surprisingly, the 40 millimeter focal length is actually quite good. It's almost like naturally what your eye sees, like in terms of perspective. And after shooting with a 28 for so long and then switching to 40, you actually don't really notice a difference, which is kind of hilarious. Also, I noticed that the image resolution, the sharpness of the 40 mil, the GR3X, is like actually substantially better than the 3. Like, to me, the image resolution and the quality looks at least 4 to 5 times better. I don't know how they do it. And typically, the newest, latest model or version of something is the best version of something. I mean, you think about it, right? Like, jumping from the Ricoh GR2 to the GR3, they went back to the smaller form factor, and they added image stabilization, all this other technology. And the 3X is like the second version of the Ricoh GR3 family, and so they probably worked out some other minor kinks. It's kind of like I never buy the first version of anything, because it usually takes a while to, like, the last GoPro I had was like a GoPro, like I bought the first OG GoPro, and then I got a free GoPro from the Ford Fiesta movement, which was like a GoPro 3 or 4 or something, and then I got a GoPro Fusion. And then it was funny, I think I was one of the first person to get a GoPro Fusion, the 360 VR cam, but then the transfer speeds were just so slow, and it was also the first version. So stopped using that. And then now actually I have the GoPro Hero 10, which actually I really love. It's really awesome. I've been having so much fun with it recently, and I like this heuristic of go where no camera has gone before, or Like I would love to do marketing for GoPro. It's really kind of, I rate it like 100 times better than even using an iPhone to shoot video, just because it's much more versatile. You can just kind of place it wherever. But anyways, taking it back onto the notion of pride in photography. Um, Also, I think in order to become proud of your photos, there is some level of like technical mastery in terms of making photos which please you. So, for example, on the Ricoh GR3X, right? Probably the most important thing is here. They have exposure compensation dial here. So when you're shooting photos, dialing down the exposure compensation to make your photos as dark as possible. Also, one thing that has really been nice for me in terms of aesthetics thing is when it comes to exposure, the AE metering, I do the highlight weighted metering, which is actually quite good for metering the photos. Also, when it comes to the JPEG settings, high contrast black and white, and if you press the function button, the settings that I have is like all +4, max screen effect, whatever, and shooting extra small JPEG. And it's just kind of nice too, because this is one funny thing I realized with shooting RAW, was when you shoot RAW, right? And then you import your photos into Lightroom, whatever. There's this kind of cognitive dissonance that happens once you import your photos. It first shows you a preview of what your in-camera settings has, and then it switches to RAW where it loses all vitality, and then it's just like it just feels it's just like, oh, why my photos look so ugly. Whereas if you shoot JPEG and you import the photos, they still look the same way that you visualize them. And so there's much more a sense of like pride and continuity with the images that way. So anyways, I would just recommend shooting JPEG. And also I would actually recommend, like, don't look at other people's photos. I mean, I did study the history of photography, studied all the master photographers as a way to understand, the history, biases, whatever. And now that I've studied all the masters, you could quote kill your masters. You got to cut the umbilical cord, and even nowadays, like, I'm just like staying more focused on myself and doing my own thing. And I don't look, I don't go on I don't use social media. I don't look at other people's photos and stuff like that. And even with art, there's not really too much other artists which really interest me. Like, nowadays I like statues. I'm into some car design. I like some fashion designs. I like stuff that Kanye West is doing. I like the new Balenciaga stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I like some sneaker design, not too much. I like architecture. And so maybe then, to gain more pride as a photographer, kind of detach yourself from all other photographers and maybe even just visual artists in general. Maybe get more inspiration from like music or something else. It's funny because I think artists are not jealous of the success of other artists in very totally different fields. So for example, if you're a photographer, you might feel a little bit of envy towards the success of let's say a videographer or a painter, maybe, but you probably wouldn't feel jealousy for the success of like a fashion designer or like a dancer or a rapper, whatever. So maybe find inspiration from other people. And even nowadays, the biggest inspiration I get is, I just go to the park with Seneca, overhear conversations, talk to kids and stuff like that. I like hanging out with kids. Kids are the ultimate artists, and kids, they have the most self-confidence. I think adulthood is a process of just beating the pride out of kids. It's actually quite sad. So I'm gonna try to prevent that. A lot of it is also unlearning all this BS that we've been indoctrinated with through our K through 12, even college education systems. And yeah, just know that The benefit of pride is that it will give you the inner motivation to keep pursuing your photography with great delight.